Tsuchi's convenient curse. Tsuchi uses a Katashiro to torture his classmate Uya, sticking pins into its stomach so that Uya collapses with stomach pain and is taken to hospital. Others in the class gossip about it while Tsuchi giggles to himself about how powerful he is. He also thinks that two girls are admiring him when in reality they think he is a loser. He then uses his powers to make two other boys have a fight and attack each other. However, Tsuchi tells the reader that he's really a kind person and proves it by rescuing a toad to keep as his pet. At home, Tsuchi boasts to his family about his power and argues with his brother Kuchi, also using the toad to scare their sister Sayuri. Getting the idea of animal hibernation from the toad, he buries a Katashiro in some parkland to represent another classmate, who goes missing and is found buried in the ground. The owner of the parkland becomes annoyed at Tsuchi damaging his trees with nails and vows to catch the culprit. Tsuchi continues to torment his siblings and classmates with various methods, but comes unstuck when he lures a classmate to the parkland in order to scare him with a giant spider costume. Tsuchi climbs a tree in his costume and gets stuck in a trap that the tree's owner set for him. Just as the man is about to attack Tsuchi with an axe, Kuchi appears. The man is forced to let the boys go when Kuchi points out that setting traps is illegal. Kuchi drags Tsuchi home, where Tsuchi is upset that his toad has died. It's suffocated because Tsuchi shut it in a box without any air. A doll's hellish burial. In this story, children have begun falling victim to early-onset doll's disease, which causes them to slowly turn into doll-like structures incapable of movement or speech. When a young girl named Maria falls victim to the disease, her parents try to console themselves with the thought that she will always look like a beautiful doll and can remain with them forever. They cannot understand why the parents of other victims of the disease throw their children away. However, when Maria continues to grotesquely decay and mutate, including growing tentacles and hideously elongated limbs, her parents are forced to finally lay her to rest. Fashion model. Iwasaki, a scriptwriter, has a premonition that something bad is about to happen. He browses through a magazine and is shocked by the horrifying appearance of one of the models featured. He begins to have nightmares about her and is haunted by the image of her face, which becomes more and more monstrous each time. On the advice of a friend, he tries to get a copy of the magazine and see if she's really as bad as he imagined, but the magazine has already been replaced with the newest issue. Iwasaki and his friends are working on a new indie film and decide to audition for the female lead, as they can't find a high school girl attractive enough. As they start to go through the casting pictures, Iwasaki begins to have a sense of dread again. Sure enough, the last picture is of the woman he saw in the magazine. Even though she looks like a monster, the others decide to hire her for another role because as a professional model she will raise the profile of their movie. The film crew meets Tammy Mori, a beautiful girl they have chosen to play the lead, and the model, who introduces herself as Miss Fuchi. In person, she is a hulking giant and her face is even more horrifying. She becomes quite taken with Iwasaki when the director jokingly says that Iwasaki is a big fan of hers. Everybody drives out to a mountain for shooting. In the car, the crew becomes wary of Fuchi when she starts to laugh, revealing her razor-sharp fangs. She obsessively stares at Iwasaki during the shoot and follows him when he goes to wash his face in the river. He tries to convince the crew to abandon filming and leave her there, but they are worried she will follow them and be angry. Fuchi appears and demands to know why they have spent the whole time ignoring her while filming Tammy. After a brief discussion among themselves, the crew decides to just shoot all of Fuchi's scenes in one go so they can get rid of her. Miyake, another crew member, runs screaming that he has just witnessed Fuchi kill and eat Tammy. The others, except Iwasaki, don't believe him until they arrive at the place he led them to and find bloodstains everywhere. A bloodstained Fuchi appears from behind a fallen tree, having eaten Tammy, and declares herself the lead actress of the movie. The four men run, and Fuchi catches and mauls Miyake to death, while everyone else runs from her. However, Iwasaki isn't fast enough, and Fuchi catches him. She is happy that she can finally be alone with him. Long dream. A girl named Mami is in hospital where she is awaiting brain surgery. She claims that the personification of death has visited her and that she is going to die soon. She pleads with Dr. Kuroda to save her, but Kuroda believes she is delusional. The man who visited her is actually another patient, Tetsuro Makoto. Makoto has horrific nightmares which, although lasting only one night, are the equivalent of a year or more in his dream. The doctors have no idea what to do with him, but each night, his dreams become 1 year longer. Over time, time, events that happened yesterday now seem like 50 years or more ago to him, and he begins talking as if he came from a different century. He ages to look like an extremely old man. One day, Makoto wakes up screaming for mommy. He says that she is his wife whom he met in the hospital, and they have now been together for thousands of years. Kuroda realizes that Makoto dreamed of her as his wife after he first saw her in her room. Makoto calls for mommy and goes to her room, but she screams and declares that death has come back to get her. Kuroda is able to explain to Makoto that his life with mommy was yet another dream. Shortly after this, Makoto records his longest dream yet. When dawn breaks, his body shatters into a pile of crystals, his body having grown too old to keep pace with his dreams. Kuroda studies the crystals but can't find a link to Makoto's condition. Mommy begins to have long dreams like Makoto, and when questioned, Kuroda admits he administered parts of Makoto's remains to her. He reasons that since she fears death and thus nothingness, reaching a state of eternal dreaming will enable her spirit to live forever. He has become obsessed with his research and believes that eventually all of humanity will want to enter the endless dream. The Intersection's Pretty Boy, the main protagonist. Ryusuke is a 16-year-old boy who has moved back to Nanchashire after 10 years due to his father's job. When he was 6 years old, he upset a woman who was playing intersection fortune-telling, which caused her to commit suicide. Ryusuke feels horribly guilty about the incident and becomes uneasy when faced with the topic of the game. He has a crush on his friend Midori, but is afraid to tell her that he feels he was responsible for the death of her aunt. After Reisher Tanaka commits suicide, Ryusuke becomes determined to hunt down the intersection Bishounen and help people playing the game. Eventually, he gains the nickname Dead Man due to his increasingly sickly appearance and for being responsible for Reishi's suicide. His friend Teshima also spreads the rumor that Ryusuke is the intersection Bishounen, which causes him to be the target of obsession by nearly every girl in school. Eventually, Ryusuke admits to Midori that he was responsible for her aunt's death, but his admission causes Midori to meet the intersection Bishounen, who compels her to emotionally and physically torture him before committing suicide. After finding out more details about the intersection Bishounen and the woman's death, Ryusuke goes to kill him. He is seemingly killed by the ghosts of the girls who played the game and the intersection Bishounen, but in the end, he becomes the white-clothed pretty boy who spreads happiness to girls playing the games. Slug Girl. Ri notices her usually talkative friend Yuko begins to have difficulty talking and has become very quiet. When she stops showing up at school, Ri visits her house. No one answers the doorbell, so she decides to go around the back of the house and finds Yuko's parents frantically squishing and throwing salt at the slugs that are everywhere. Yuko's mother leads Ri to Yuko's room, where she is sitting in bed with a face mask on. Yuko's mother mentions that the doctor only found Yuko's mental health to be weak. When she asks to look into Yuko's mouth, Yuko refuses. The next day, Ri returns to find Yuko's mother panicked and sees that Yuko's tongue has turned into a slug. Ri runs away and never returns to that house. She talks about hearing the lengths Yuko and her parents went through to get rid of it. They try cutting off her tongue, but it grew back. Unable to eat, Yuko becomes very sickly, and her parents decide to bury Yuko in a bathtub of salt. She does not resurface, and her parents reach in to grab her, but they grab only her clothes. Yuko seemingly vanished. They find her head in the tub, her body shrunk to a tiny size because of the salt. However, the slug emerges from Yuko's mouth still alive and crawls away, her head still attached almost like a snail's shell. Surprisingly, Yuko remains alive and was seen to open her eyes, giving a sad look. Shivers. Yuji lives next door to a girl named Rina, who cannot leave the house because she has a serious illness. She screams in terror that there are bugs swarming all over her, although her mother says it's a hallucination. Rina is regularly visited at home by a doctor, but his visits cause her to become extremely agitated. Yuji has also observed that her skin is full of deep holes everywhere. Her family's garden is completely overgrown, and on the rare occasions Yuji sees her outside, she will point at the bushes and giggle. One day, after seeing her appear, he suddenly has a memory of when he was a young child and his grandfather died. Yuji saw that his grandfather's body had become completely hollowed out with holes like Rina's, but his parents told him he imagined it. In the present day, Yuji meets up with his friend Hideo. Hideo's mother is a midwife at the local hospital who delivered Rina at birth. Rina was born not breathing, and the doctors could not explain how she was alive. But then the holes began to open in her skin, and she was somehow able to breathe through them. However, Hideo claims his mother might be making this story up, and Yuji doesn't know what to believe. Hideo browses through the books at Yuji's house, and the two read through a diary that Yuji's grandfather wrote. After acquiring a jade insect statue that an old comrade found in Java, he developed a chill and was visited by a mysterious doctor who gave him an injection. Holes began to open up in his skin and draft came in through them. Then, insects began to crawl out from the holes in swarms. He called this the curse of the jade statue and threw it into the neighboring garden. He also believed that the doctor who had been visiting him wanted to steal the jade. The boys put down the diary when Rina appears at her window, once again pointing towards the bushes. Hideo starts to feel cold, so he leaves. Yuji watches as Rina's doctor comes to visit her, but she screams and slams the door in his face. Yuji half remembers the face of the doctor who attended Yuji's grandfather, and comes to suspect they are the same person. He debates over whether or not to tell Rina's family that his grandfather is responsible for the curse on their daughter. Hideo encourages Yuji to keep quiet about it, but Yuji resolves he must tell the truth. As he is about to go over to their house, he sees Rina in the garden outside, apparently recovered. She is calm and happy, and her skin looks completely normal. That night, Hideo, now completely hollowed out with holes, breaks into Yuji's room. On the day they found the diary, he went looking for the jade statue in the bushes outside Rina's house. He took a chance with the curse because he knew the jade must be valuable, but then the holes began to open up in his body. He is now possessed by the statue and can't throw it away, although he has tried many times. He says that the doctor is the curse's messenger, who appears wherever the jade is. Suddenly, the doctor appears and Hideo runs screaming from him. The following day, Yuji finds Hideo's dead body beside the river where he had tried to dispose of the jade. The jade is nowhere to be found. House of the Marionettes. Haruhiko's family travel around Japan putting on puppet shows. They never stay anywhere for longer than a month, so Haruhiko has no time to make friends. While staying in one town, he becomes friendly with a girl called Kanuko and takes her to see his family's puppets. She is frightened by Jean-Pierre, a creepy-looking puppet that belongs to his brother Yukihiko. Shortly after, the family has to leave town, but Kanuko promises that she will see Haruhiko again. Haruhiko's father gets sick and the family has to move into an apartment. Their father talks about how he loves being a puppeteer because he controls the puppets completely. While alone with Haruhiko, Yukihiko says he's always thought that it was the other way around. Their father was doing whatever the puppets wanted. He runs away from home that night. Their father later dies and Haruhiko and his sister Natsumi go to live with a cousin, eventually getting their own place when Haruhiko is in high school. Haruhiko meets Kanuko again and she becomes his girlfriend. One day they receive a letter from Yukihiko. He is now living in the same town and invites them to visit him, his wife, and his son. He is extremely rich and owns his own company, but he and his family are suspended from piano wire that is controlled from the ceiling by hired puppeteers. Haruhiko is very disturbed, but Yukihiko says that the puppet is the one in charge of the puppeteer. Yukihiko still has Jean-Pierre, and he owns a set of life-sized ballet dancer puppets designed to entertain people. Haruhiko doesn't want to visit again, but Natsumi loves Yukihiko's house, and they begin to visit regularly. She wants to become a puppet herself and dance like the ballet puppets. She dresses up and is controlled by the puppeteers to dance beautifully like the dolls. Haruhiko is upset that Yukihiko and his family have never taken the strings off in 2 years, and even more upset when Natsumi refuses to take off her costume and go home. He is forced to let Natsumi live with Yukihiko, but refuses to move in himself. He doesn't want Kanuko to meet Yukihiko and has to make excuses for his visits to Yukihiko's house. When Haruhiko visits the house one day, the ballet puppets lead him into a room and try to get him to put on strings. Kanuko has followed him and is watching from the street. She mistakes one of the puppets for a real woman and thinks Haruhiko is cheating on her. Suddenly, Jean-Pierre arrives and lures her into the house. Inside, the puppets have begun to dance wildly, including Yukihiko and his family. Yukihiko screams that Jean-Pierre is out of control, causing Haruhiko to realize that Jean-Pierre has been manipulating Yukihiko's mind the whole time. Haruhiko chases after Jean-Pierre and discovers Kanuko, whom Jean-Pierre has violently stabbed to death and suspended from the ceiling. After a brief fight, Haruhiko destroys Jean-Pierre by slamming him to pieces. He rescues Natsumi, but Yukihiko and his family are no longer human. They are marionettes made of wood. Haruhiko thinks that maybe they were always that way, he just didn't notice. Further tales of Ashikiri. A terrified young woman runs through Ashikiri's house, afraid that he will find her there. Ashikiri recognizes her as his classmate, Mio Fuji. He demands to know why she's there so late, but Mio screams and runs from him. When he grabs her, she disappears into thin air. The next day, Mio is at school as if nothing happened. She is her normal happy self and seems totally different from the girl Ashikiri saw. Ashikiri concludes that his house contains a portal to other dimensions, and the Mio he met last night must must have been from a parallel universe. The present Mio has noticed him watching her, but Ashikiri denies it. A bully named Aoyama teases Ashikiri about his height, and the two get into a fight, although Mio tries to intervene to stop it. Back at home, Ashikiri wonders again about the alternate Mio he saw in his house and why she was so afraid of him. He suddenly hears Aoyama's voice. When he goes out into the hallway, he sees that Aoyama is a giant monster heading towards him. Aoyama melts into a puddle of slime, proving that what Ashikiri saw was real. However, when Ashikiri goes to school the following day, Aoyama is there as usual. Ashikiri and Mio become close over time. Mio has heard from classmates that Ashikiri's house is like a magnificent western castle, and she asks him to show her around. Ashikiri takes Mio to his house but won't show her inside, and explains that it contains a portal to another dimension where his and Mio's doubles live. Mio believes that Ashikiri is making this up to keep people from getting too close to him. She encourages him to let her in to both his heart and the house. Ashikiri agrees that what he saw might have been hallucinations, but then sees that Mio is missing. Mio doesn't return to school for 3 days. Ashikiri believes she has become trapped in the parallel dimension. He hears her voice and goes out into the hallway, where Mio has become a gigantic blob monster. She says that Ashikiri did this to her and vows to curse him before dissolving away into slime like the parallel Aoyama. Ashikiri realizes that the parallel dimension is in a state of chaos and it's his counterpart that's causing it. Suddenly, Ashikiri finds himself on a different floor of the house. There, his counterpart has tied up Mio and is experimenting on her with a syringe. He states that he's tried his drugs before on both her and Aoyama, but the experiments ended disastrously. Mio and Ashikiri are now trapped in this other Ashikiri's world. Both versions of Ashikiri fight over the syringe, and one gets injected, causing his bones and muscles to tear apart and extend. Ashikiri frees Mio and explains that he is the real Ashikiri she knew. He had taken the syringe from his counterpart and injected him. The alternate Ashikiri is dying, but cackles to them that there are an infinite number of alternate dimensions to be accessed, all of which contain an even more malevolent Ashikiri. He dissolves into slime like all his other experiments. Ashikiri and Mio wonder how they're going to return to their own world. The neighbor's window. Hiroshi Sakaguchi and his family move into a new house. He is curious about the house next door, which has only one window. They discover that the inhabitant, a middle-aged woman, is never seen, but neighbors have spotted a figure at the window during the night. When Hiroshi goes to bed, he hears a voice calling to him and sees a woman with a hideous, corpse-like face and clawed, bony hands asking him to come visit her. Hiroshi thinks it was a dream, but the following night, he hears the voice again, now upset that he didn't visit. He looks out of the window to see the woman trying to climb across to his room using a washing line pole. Hiroshi knocks the pole down and runs into his parents' room, calling for help. When they return to Hiroshi's room, they can't see anything outside and are not sure whether it was real or not. After some discussion, the family agrees that Hiroshi will switch rooms with his parents. The woman doesn't reappear, and Hiroshi eventually moves back to his old room, believing it was a dream after all. When he goes to sleep, the woman appears once more, this time trying to reach over to his house with only her hands, hoping to knock on his window. However, to her dismay, she can't reach, but tells Hiroshi to wait as she has another way. The window next door has magically stretched out from the woman's house towards his own, just a few feet from his own. Hiroshi figures that by the end of that night, she'll be able to reach his window and he will no longer be safe. Hiroshi decides to accept his fate and waits for the woman and her window to reach his house and his window, possibly creating a tunnel for her to crawl through into his room. Meanwhile, his family is talking about moving to another house, leaving Hiroshi's fate unknown. Lingering farewell. Riko regularly has nightmares about her beloved father dying. When she marries the wealthy Makoto Takura against his family's wishes, she is sad to leave her father and continues to have nightmares about his death. Makoto's entire family lives together, including his great-grandparents. One day, Riko sees what she thinks is the ghost of a very elderly person. Makoto claims that he has many elderly relatives in the house, but all of them, including great-grandma and great-grandpa, have begun to disappear because they are just after-images. The following day, Makoto's grandfather dies. After the mourners leave, Makoto's father leads the family in a ritual to concentrate on the thought of the dead person reappearing. Everyone does so, and shortly afterwards, Grandpa returns even though he was cremated. Makoto later tells Riko that his family has always done this and the dead people are after-images, illusions formed from the memories of the living. They linger for only 20 years or so before vanishing forever, but this is usually enough time for the family's grief to be soothed. Riko asks if Makoto will be able to help her her make an afterimage of her father when he dies. Makoto says that the afterimages come from the memories of many people, so he would need the support of the whole family. Makoto's parents refuse, and Riko runs, sobbing from the room. Makoto's sister Tomoka, the only member of the family who cares for Riko, tries to comfort her, but Riko's hand passes through Tomoka's face. Makoto admits that Tomoka is an afterimage. She has already begun to fade even though she died only 10 years ago. Tomoka remains unaware that she is no longer alive, although she fades more and more every day. 10 years pass, and the afterimages of Makoto's older relations all disappear. Whenever there is a new death in the family, Riko takes part in the ritual to create an afterimage, but even though she tries hard to please Makoto's parents, they never accept her. Riko eventually discovers that Makoto is having an affair with a colleague. He plans to marry his new girlfriend, but Riko refuses to give him a divorce. Makoto says that she won't need to. She was hit by a car and killed the day before their wedding. Makoto's family, with the exception of his parents, took pity on him and agreed to create an afterimage of her. Riko decides everything that's happened is her fault as much as Makoto's, and that she paid more attention to her father than to her husband. She says goodbye to Tomoka and returns home to her beloved father, wondering which of them will be the first to leave. Secondhand Record. Nakayama's friend Ogawa owns an old-fashioned record player. She has acquired a record that contains a haunting jazz tune without lyrics. She and Nakayama both become fixated with listening to the record over and over, with Nakayama visiting Ogawa many times just to be able to hear the song. The record has a blank jacket, no name on the label, and Ogawa won't say where she got it from. She refuses to let Nakayama borrow it or record the song for herself, and the two argue. Ogawa becomes hysterical, screaming that the record is more important than her own life. Nakayama steals the record and runs away. Ogawa notices it missing and chases her out into an alleyway, violently attacking Nakayama. Nakayama defends herself with a rock, but accidentally kills Ogawa in the struggle. Nakayama covers Ogawa's body with a tarpaulin, but then hears Ogawa singing along to the song from under the sheet. Believing that Ogawa is still alive and playing dead just to scare her, Nakayama leaves, feeling that her actions are justified because she must do anything to have the record. However, Nakayama doesn't own a record player. She is unable to find one until she comes across a shop that buys and sells old records. The owner won't let her play the record inside the shop, but when he sees the record, he claims that it belongs to him and demands Nakayama return it. He had been alone in the shop with a young female customer, Ogawa, when the record went missing, and believes the young woman was Nakayama. He becomes angrier and angrier, and just like Ogawa, he says that the record is more important than his life. Fleeing from the record shop owner, Nakayama decides to hide out in a jazz club on the street, realizing that its jukebox can play the record for her. Because it's a jazz tune, the barman agrees to play it. There is only one other patron in the bar, who tells Nakayama that he knows where the record came from. There is an apocryphal story of a jazz singer named Paula Bell, who was on her way to record her first ever LP when she was hit by a car in front of the studio. She refused medical help and wanted to be taken inside the studio to record, but she collapsed and died in front of the microphone. The staff heard her sing a beautiful, haunting melody which they believed to be her voice from the afterlife, and then found that they had accidentally recorded it. From then on, the record was circulated secretly. Unnerved by the man, Nakayama leaves the bar, but he follows her. She runs from him, but then sees the record store owner still looking for her. They trap her in the alleyway where she last saw Ogawa. Her exit is blocked by the body of Ogawa, who is really dead, but still singing along. Nakayama realizes why she heard Ogawa singing and knows that the record's power caused her to be lured here. She tries to leave by climbing over a wall, but the structure falls on her and crushes her to death. The bar patron finds the record where she dropped it and takes it for himself. The record shop owner, on the other side of the wall, doesn't see what happened to the record. At first, he thinks it must have been destroyed in the collapse, but then he hears the song again. It's Nakayama, now singing the music from the next world. The town without streets. Saiko begins having romantic dreams about Kishimoto, a boy in her class. Her friend suggests that Kishimoto has used the Aristotle theory to get Saiko to fall for him, breaking into her room at night and whispering in her ear to implant his voice into her subconscious. Saiko doesn't believe it until her brother says he heard a boy's voice in her room. That night in her dream, Kishimoto confesses to her with a ring, but is subsequently murdered by a man with a knife who calls himself Jack the Ripper. When she awakes, she finds an empty jewelry box beside her, and Kishimoto Kishimoto is found disemboweled on the street that day. Psycho's family starts behaving strangely towards her, constantly drilling holes in her walls and sealing to spy on her. When her friends will no longer let her stay with them, she decides to live with her aunt. She travels to the town where her aunt lives, but finds that there are no bus or taxi services, forcing her to walk. She soon discovers that the roads are completely blocked by wooden buildings, and all the people in the town wear creepy carnival masks. Eventually, a man offers her help, and she finds out that he's going the same way as her. The man explains that the townspeople woke up to find the buildings had mysteriously appeared. When people tried to take them apart, they would reappear good as new. Now there are no streets left, and everything is covered in the buildings. People have to walk through them to get anywhere, even though this means frequently going through others' houses. He and Psycho are interrupted when they come to a house whose owners have blocked the door. The townspeople, furious, break in and violently beat the inhabitants. Psycho wants to leave the town, but feels that she must rescue her aunt first. She frees the couple living in the blockaded house, who have been tied to a pole. They tell her the masks are worn to preserve some illusion of privacy and to protect everyone from the strange new inhabitants of the town. Psycho's aunt lives in an area where there are many stabbings and where the strange people have begun to gather. For her own protection, Psycho puts on a mask that one of the townspeople dropped. Her aunt is nothing like the person Psycho remembers. Aunt Tammy now walks around naked, doesn't wear a mask, and has peepholes drilled in all the walls and ceilings. She has completely rejected the idea of privacy. She wants Psycho to strip and eventually threatens her with a sharp knife. Psycho runs away but encounters strange creatures peeping through the walls. They have elongated heads and many eyes, with a peephole for each one. Running outside, she comes across the man she met when she first arrived in town. She realizes from the ring on his finger that he is Jack the Ripper. He confesses to killing Kishimoto and says that Psycho was his originally planned victim, but Kishimoto showed up at the last minute. Jack pulls a knife on Psycho but is suddenly killed by Aunt Tammy behind him. She throws her knife into the river and says that following the river upstream will take Psycho out of town. Psycho pleads for Aunt Tammy to leave with her, but she simply walks off without another word, leaving Psycho to navigate the buildings by herself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and write in the comments if you want to see the continuation.